Critical race theory in the office. Bank of America and Lowe's reportedly sponsored critical race theory training that urged white people to, quote, cede power to people of color. These two companies are just the latest to hold diversity training with CRT elements. American Express, Raytheon, Disney, and Lockheed Martin have also done so. Joining me now, Vivek Ramaswamy, entrepreneur and author of Woke Incorporated. Vivek, your whole book is about this. Why would a major corporation do this?
Yeah, well, look, I talk about this extensively in the book. I think a lot of this actually dates back to the 2008 financial crisis, when after that, corporations were the bad guys in the eyes of the old left. But there was this new opportunity with the rise of a new woke progressive left to be able to say we can actually go from being the bad guys to being the good guys if we say the right things about racial diversity, about racial inequity, about misogyny and bigotry. And guess what? Financial firms, especially like Bank of America, like American Express, jumped on that opportunity. They were happy to use their money and lend their legitimacy to the new woke movement, but they used that to put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption. And the trade has actually worked really well for them, because if you're Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street is a pretty tough pill to swallow, but the new diversity agenda under these woke banners, that's actually a pretty easy pill to swallow. And so that's how they were able to make that trade, and it's worked out pretty well for them to deflect regulatory accountability, to deflect public scrutiny, to change the conversation from the kinds of things they'd rather not be talking about. So that's where it began. Unfortunately, I never imagined how far it would come.
Deflect criticism from what these firms, particularly financial firms, are doing in China, kowtowing,
absolutely,
genuflecting to the Communist Party there. It's worked so far, but will it continue to work? Because, again, it's all employees who are being subjected to this training that they find kind of shocking. But how long can this keep going on?
Well, look, one of the things I talk about in my book is I hope not very long, because there are novel legal strategies available to employees who don't want to bow down to this new orthodoxy, but many of them do bend the knee for fear of losing their jobs. So one of the things I talk about for the first time in the book is a legal argument that says, actually, the Civil Rights Act in 1964 prevents discrimination on account of religion. And yes, that prevents an employer from discriminating against an employee on account of his religion, but it also prevents an employer from stuffing their religion down the throats of their employees. And if you look at whether this new test of wokeness actually meets the Supreme Court's test for religion, it actually hits the Supreme Court's test in spades. So if wokeness is really a religion, then forcing employees to actually bow to this new religion is a violation of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. That's one of many legal arguments that I think employees and other stakeholders can take to court to say that actually a lot of these behaviors and forms of woke corporate overreach are really downright illegal, even under current law. So hopefully with the publication of the book last week, that we're really changing the conversation around these topics. And I think once corporations start to face legal consequences for their overreach, nobody's going to want to go to court over it. And I think that's actually going to begin to shape behavior in a different direction. I do think that legal solutions are just symptomatic therapy. What we really need in this country is a cultural cure, and that's a lot harder to do, something I also talk about in the book. But I do think that the tide is going to change as long as we have shareholders and employees and other stakeholders of businesses begin to actually take legal action against these forms of overreach.
There's a lot of money at work because there's a vast ecosystem of and I use this term loosely, consultants who go into these companies and teach all of the diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI training.
It's a big industry.
Right. It's a huge industry. And I've argued that a lot of the people who are younger, they were educated at very super left-wing universities or colleges, like liberal arts colleges. So this was ingrained in them in college. This is what they got for $250,000 or more. And then they go into these companies, into human resources. And so it's kind of buried in the core of these many of these corporations.
Yeah, you nailed it. You know, people like to talk about the deep state. Well, I actually like to talk about deep corporate. I wasn't born in elite America, but I have lived in it for the last 15 years. I've been to Harvard, Yale as students. Mm-hmm. I've worked on Wall Street. I've started a venture-backed company. I have seen how this game is played. And I will tell you that this deep corporate force is actually a really profitable one for the diversity industrial complex on the outside. You know, this week of Afghanistan, we're talking about the military industrial complex, right. A bunch of people that had no incentive to actually stand up the Afghan military on their own, but made a buck for 20 years. Well, guess what? I'm seeing the same thing in the woke industrial complex, the diversity industrial complex, which has no incentive to solve actual social problems, but has every incentive to keep talking about them and keep charging a high fee for it. And the banks are happy to pay it because they'd rather pay Robin DiAngelo a lot of money to talk about white fragility. If you talk about a Marxist to come in and give a lecture, they wouldn't like what the Marxist has to say. And so this is a way of entering an arranged marriage with the new left, but to be able to silence the old left that cared about economic inequality instead. And I'm sorry to say it's working out for everybody, even the Chinese Communist Party, by the way. But the people who are really left holding the bag are the American people as we know it.
Vivek, the book is Woke Incorporated. I bought it. It's amazing. Vivek, I hope everybody goes and gets a copy of it. Woke Incorporated by Vivek Ramaswamy. Please come back. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.